Amira woke up early that morning just as she always did. The sky was still dark and the sound of roosters echoed through the neighborhood. She washed her face with cold water, tied her scarf, and hurried to the kitchen to begin her chores. The smell of soap and fresh bread filled the mansion as she swept and cleaned every corner. Amira worked quietly, humming a soft tune, happy to keep her job and send a little money home to her younger brother, Kunal, in the village. But that morning felt different. Chief Duro's wife, Madame Beezy, seemed restless. She walked around the house, opening drawers and pulling clothes from the closet. "Where is my gold bracelet?" she asked loudly, her voice sharp and angry. Everyone in the house froze. The cook stopped stirring her pot. The driver paused by the gate. Amira, holding a mop, turned to look in confusion. "I saw Amira cleaning the madam's room earlier," said the house manager, a tall man named Tund. He crossed his arms and gave Amira a hard look. She was the last one inside. Amira's heart began to beat fast. "Sir, I only cleaned," she said softly. "I didn't take anything. I would never steal." Madame Beezy's eyes narrowed. "Are you calling my manager a liar?" she shouted. "No, ma," Amira whispered. "But I didn't do it." The whole house was silent. The cook, the driver, and even the gardener looked at Amira with pity, but no one spoke. Madame Beezy turned away and said coldly, "I cannot keep a thief in my home. Pack your things and leave right now." Tears filled Amira's eyes. "Please, ma. I am not a thief," she begged. "I swear on my mother's grave I didn't take anything." But Madame Beezy's heart was closed. "Enough," she snapped. "I don't want to see you here again. Leave before I call the police." Amira's hands shook as she walked to her small room at the back of the house. She packed her few clothes, 2 dresses, an old pair of shoes, and a worn Bible that had belonged to her mother. She wiped her tears quietly, afraid someone might see her cry. The cook, Mama Funk, came to the door and whispered, "My child, don't cry. God sees everything. The truth will come out one day." Amira nodded but couldn't speak. Her throat felt tight. She wanted to believe Mama Funk's words, but right now, all she felt was pain. She had worked so hard only to be treated like dirt. As she walked through the big gate, the driver, Sei, smirked and turned away. She didn't know why he looked so pleased, but she didn't care anymore. She just wanted to get far from the mansion that had brought her so much sorrow. Outside, the sun was already rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The streets of Ibadan were busy, traders shouting, buses honking, and children running to school. Amira walked slowly, clutching her small bag. She had nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Her heart felt heavy as she thought of her brother. "What will I tell Kunal?" she whispered to herself. "He depends on me." As she walked, she remembered her first day at Chief Duro's house. She had been so happy, so hopeful. She thought working there would change her life. Madame Beezy had even smiled at her then, saying, "You look like a good girl. Work hard and you'll stay long." Now everything was gone, her job, her home, her dignity. She found a bench by the roadside and sat down, tired and hungry. The morning air was cold and her stomach rumbled. She hadn't eaten since last night. She closed her eyes and tried to pray, but the words wouldn't come. Only tears fell silently down her cheeks. People walked past without noticing her. A few glanced, but no one stopped. In a big city like Ibadan, everyone had their own troubles. After a while, Amira stood up again and began to walk. She didn't know where her feet were taking her. She just kept moving, hoping that maybe somewhere someone would believe her. She passed markets, small shops, and noisy bus stops. The smell of roasted corn filled the air, but she had no money to buy any. By the time the sun reached the middle of the sky, her legs ached and her throat was dry. She saw a small shelter by the road and sat down under a tree. She opened her bag, took out her mother's Bible and held it close. "Mama," she whispered, "you always said truth never dies. But why does it hurt so much to be good?" A gentle wind blew through the trees and for a moment she felt calm. The noise of the city faded and she could almost hear her mother's voice in her heart. "Keep faith, my daughter. No lie lives forever." Amira closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She promised herself she would not lose hope. Maybe one day someone would find the real thief. Maybe one day her name would be cleared. She stood up again and began walking toward the old part of town. She had heard there was a church there that helped people in need. Perhaps she could find shelter for a night. The road ahead was long and rough, but Amira kept walking, her small bag swinging by her side and her heart whispering one prayer. Let the truth come out. As the evening sun sank behind the city buildings, painting everything gold, Amira's shadow stretched across the ground, small, tired, but still moving forward. Though she had lost everything, she still carried her kindness, her faith, and her mother's words. And somewhere, far behind her in Chief Duro's mansion, a man named Sei sat quietly in his room, turning something shiny in his hand, Madame Beezy's missing bracelet. He smiled to himself, never knowing that one day his secret would change everything. The end. Amira walked aimlessly through the streets of Ibadan as the sun slowly began to set behind the crowded buildings. Her legs ached, her back hurt, and her small bag felt heavier with every step. She had not eaten since morning and her throat was dry. People moved past her quickly, busy with their lives. Traders shouting, children laughing, buses honking loudly. Nobody noticed the young girl walking with tears in her eyes. When night began to fall, Amira stopped near a quiet corner where an old church stood. The church was small, its white paint fading, but it looked peaceful. The sound of gentle singing came from inside. She sat on the steps, pulled her scarf around her shoulders, and began to cry quietly. Her tears dropped onto her hands as she whispered, "God, why me? I only wanted to work and help my brother. Why must I suffer for something I didn't do?" Inside the church, a kind woman named Mama Ruth was cleaning the benches. She was in her late 50s, gentle-faced, and known for helping anyone in need. When she heard soft crying outside, she put down her cloth and walked to the door. There she saw Amira sitting on the steps, shivering slightly from the evening breeze. "My daughter," Mama Ruth said softly, walking closer. "Why are you crying here alone?" Amira quickly wiped her face. "Nothing, Ma," she said, trying to stand up. But Mama Ruth stopped her gently. "Sit, child," she said kindly. "You look hungry and tired. Tell me what happened." At first, Amira didn't want to talk. She was scared of being judged again. But Mama Ruth's voice was calm, full of care, like her mother's voice long ago. So, she slowly began to tell her story. She told her about Chief Duro's mansion, about Madame Beezy's gold bracelet, and about how everyone believed she had stolen it. Mama Ruth listened carefully, nodding as Amira spoke. When Amira finished, she sighed and said softly, "My child, the world can be unfair, but God sees everything. The truth always comes out even if it takes time." Amira wiped her tears again. "I have nowhere to go," she whispered. "No money, no family here. My brother is still in the village. I was saving to bring him to the city." Mama Ruth smiled gently and placed a warm hand on her shoulder. "You will not sleep outside tonight. Come inside, my daughter. There is room in God's house for everyone." She led Amira into the church, where the air smelled of old wood and candle wax. Mama Ruth gave her a small plate of food, rice and beans, and a cup of water. Amira ate slowly, her hands trembling slightly. Each bite felt like hope returning to her empty stomach. After eating, Mama Ruth showed her a small room at the back of the church. It had only a thin mattress, a blanket, and a lamp, but to Amira, it felt like a palace. She thanked Mama Ruth again and again, her heart soft with gratitude. "You don't need to thank me," Mama Ruth said. "Just rest now. Tomorrow will be better." That night, Amira lay on the mattress, staring at the ceiling. The church was quiet except for the soft sound of crickets outside. She thought about her life, how quickly things had changed. Just 2 days ago she had a job, food, and a roof over her head. Now she had nothing but the kindness of a stranger. Still, for the first time in a while she felt safe. She whispered a small prayer before sleep took her. "Thank you, Lord, for sending Mama Ruth." The next morning, the sound of children's laughter woke her. She peeked out and saw Mama Ruth helping some children wash their hands before breakfast. The church also ran a small home for orphans and street kids. When Amira stepped outside shyly, one of the little girls smiled and waved. "Good morning," Mama Ruth said with a smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Ma." "Thank you so much," Amira replied. Mama Ruth handed her a broom. "Come, my daughter. If you are strong, you can help us clean today." Amira smiled for the first time in days. She joined the children and began sweeping the yard. The warm morning sun touched her face and she felt lighter. The children laughed and told her jokes, and soon she found herself laughing with them. Days turned into weeks, and Amira started helping more around the church. She cleaned the pews, helped Mama Ruth cook for the children, and even taught the younger ones how to read from the old Bible. The children loved her because she was gentle and patient. Sometimes, when she was alone, the pain of what had happened still returned to her heart. She would think of Madame Beezy's angry face and the way everyone had looked at her with suspicion. But Mama Ruth's words always came back to her mind: God sees everything. The truth always comes out. One Sunday afternoon after service, Mama Ruth sat beside Amira under the big mango tree near the church. "You have a good heart, my child," she said kindly. "Don't let what happened change that. The world may treat you unfairly, but kindness is your strength." Amira looked down and smiled faintly. "Sometimes I still feel angry," she admitted. "I did nothing wrong, yet I lost everything." Mama Ruth nodded. "Yes, that is life. But sometimes losing everything gives us the chance to find what really matters." Amira thought about that for a long time. She had lost her job, her home, and her name had been stained by lies. But she had also found a safe place, a kind woman, and a new family in the church. As days went by, Amira began to smile more often. She would sing with the children, help Mama Ruth serve food to hungry people, and sweep the front steps of the church each morning. The pain in her heart was still there, but it no longer controlled her. One evening after cleaning, she looked at the sunset and said softly, "Maybe this is where I was meant to be, at least for now." Mama Ruth, who was nearby, heard her and smiled. "Yes, my daughter," she said. "God always has a reason. And when the time is right, He will show you the truth." Amira nodded, feeling a deep peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The city outside was still noisy, the world still unfair, but in that little church she had found hope again. That night, she knelt by her bed and prayed, not for revenge or anger but for strength, for faith, and for the truth to someday find its way back to her. And as the candles flickered softly beside her, Amira smiled through her tears. For the first time since leaving Chief Duro's mansion, her heart whispered, "Everything will be okay." The sun was high in the sky and the air was warm. Amira stood outside the church, sweeping the yard as the children played nearby. The smell of fresh palm soup from the kitchen filled the air, and laughter echoed around her. It had been many weeks since she came to stay with Mama Ruth, and though her life was simple now, her heart had found a small kind of peace. Every morning she swept, cooked, and helped the children read. She had started to feel like she belonged again. Yet deep in her heart, the memory of her past still lingered. Sometimes at night, she would think about the day Madame Beezy threw her out, and tears would fill her eyes. She didn't hate anyone, but she longed for the truth to come out. She often told herself, "One day God will show everyone that I was innocent." That afternoon, as she swept near the road outside the church, two men stopped under the mango tree to rest. They were chatting loudly, laughing as they drank from a small plastic bottle of water. Amira didn't pay them much attention at first, she was focused on cleaning, but then she heard one of them say a name that made her freeze. "That driver, say, is a fool," the first man said. "He stole his madam's gold and sold it cheap at the market." Amira's heart stopped for a moment. Her broom slipped from her hand and she turned her head slowly. Could she have heard that right? The second man laughed. "You mean that same Sei who used to work for Chief Duro? The one who always bragged about his madam's jewelry?" "Yes, that one," the first man said, lowering his voice slightly but still loud enough for Amira to hear. "He came to my cousin's bar one night, drunk as a goat. He was showing off, saying he sold a gold bracelet for quick cash. Said nobody would suspect him because they all blamed the poor maid." Amira gasped quietly, her hands shaking. Her heart began to race so fast that she could feel it in her throat. She took a small step forward and said nervously, "Excuse me, sirs, did you say Sei? Please, can you tell me more?" The two men looked at her, surprised. One of them frowned. "Why are you asking?" Amira swallowed hard. "Because I was the maid in that house. They said I stole the gold, but it wasn't me." "Please, did you really hear him say this?" The men exchanged looks. The first one nodded slowly. "Yes, he said it himself. He even laughed about it. My cousin said he ran away the next morning to Lagos." Amira's eyes filled with tears, but not of sadness this time. It was relief, joy, and shock all at once. The truth had finally found its way to her, just as Mama Ruth said it would. Thank you so much," she said quickly, bowing slightly to the men. They looked confused but smiled politely before walking away. Amira picked up her broom, but her hands were trembling. She couldn't focus anymore. The broom fell again and she covered her face with her hands, crying softly. But these were tears of freedom. She whispered, "Thank you, God. I knew you would not leave me in shame." She ran inside the church calling out, "Mama Ruth! Mama Ruth!" Mama Ruth came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her wrapper. "What is it, my child? Why are you crying again?" Amira caught her breath. "Mama, I just heard something very important. Two men outside said Sei, the driver from Chief Duro's house, stole Madame Beezy's bracelet. They said he bragged about it at a bar before he ran away to Lagos. Mama Ruth's eyes widened. Are you sure of what you heard? Yes, Mama. I heard it clearly. They even said he sold it for money. Mama Ruth held her hand gently. Oh, my dear child, God has answered your prayers. You see? The truth cannot hide forever. Amira nodded, tears running down her face. I knew it, Mama. I knew I didn't do anything wrong. Now I can go back and tell Madame Beezy everything. I must clear my name. Mama Ruth looked thoughtful. You must be careful, Amira. Sometimes people refuse to listen even when you have proof. I understand, Mama, Amira said. But I cannot keep quiet. They must know I was innocent. Mama Ruth sighed and smiled softly. Then we will go together, my child. We will find Madame Beezy and tell her what you heard. You deserve to have your name cleared. Amira hugged her tightly. Thank you, Mama. You've done so much for me. Mama Ruth patted her back. No, my daughter. You did not give up. That's what matters. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned orange, Amira sat outside the church, staring at the road ahead. Her mind was full of memories, the shouting, the humiliation, the pain of being thrown out. But now there was also hope. The truth was her light, and she was ready to follow it. Later that night, after the children had gone to sleep, Amira sat with Mama Ruth and planned what to do. We will go tomorrow morning, Mama Ruth said firmly. We will speak calmly and let God lead the way. Amira nodded. Yes, Mama. I want to look her in the eyes and tell her the truth. That night, Amira could hardly sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her heart full of emotions. She thought about how everything had changed, how one lie had destroyed her life, and now one truth could set her free. She imagined Madame Beezy's face when she would tell her what happened. Would she believe her? Would she apologize? Would she finally see that Amira had been innocent all along? As she closed her eyes, she whispered, Lord, give me courage tomorrow. Let my words be true and let my heart stay kind. The next morning came quickly. The air was cool and the sun had not yet risen high. Amira dressed neatly in her cleanest clothes. Mama Ruth gave her a small bag of food and held her hand. Remember, my daughter, she said gently, the truth does not need to shout. It stands strong on its own. Amira smiled faintly. Yes, Mama. Thank you. They left the church together, walking toward Chief Duro's mansion. As they walked, Amira felt her heart beating fast, but this time, it was not from fear. It was strength. The strength that comes when innocence finally finds a voice. And as they walked, Mama Ruth said quietly, Do you see now, my child? God does not forget the innocent. He only waits for the right time. Amira nodded slowly. Yes, Mama. The truth has finally found me. Now it's time for me to take it home. Her steps were light, her spirit strong, and for the first time in many weeks, Amira smiled, not because life was easy but because justice was near. The morning sun rose gently over Ibadan, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink. Amira woke up early, her heart beating fast but steady. Today was the day she would face her past, the day she would return to Madame Beezy's mansion and speak the truth. She sat quietly on her small bed, saying a short prayer. God, please give me strength, she whispered. Let them see that I was never a thief. Mama Ruth entered the room, carrying 2 small pieces of bread and a flask of tea. Eat, my daughter, she said kindly. You'll need your strength today. Amira nodded and ate slowly, though her stomach felt tight with nerves. Mama, what if she refuses to believe me? She asked softly. Mama Ruth smiled gently. The truth doesn't need anyone's permission to shine. When light enters a dark room, the darkness must leave. Her words gave Amira courage. She dressed neatly in her cleanest gown and tied her scarf carefully. Mama Ruth carried a small brown envelope, proof from the jeweler that showed Sei had sold the missing bracelet weeks ago. The jeweler had confirmed that Sei had come to him, desperate for cash, and traded a gold bracelet engraved with Madame Beezy's initials. By mid-morning they reached Chief Duro's mansion. The tall gate stood before them like a wall from another life. Amira stopped for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. Memories rushed back, the shouting, the shame, the long walk she took when she was thrown out. But she took a deep breath and whispered, It's time. The guards at the gate looked surprised when they saw her. One of them frowned. Isn't this the girl Madame chased away? He asked quietly. Mama Ruth stepped forward calmly. Please tell your madam that we need to speak with her. It's about the missing gold bracelet. The guards hesitated, then nodded and went inside. A few minutes later, Madame Beezy appeared at the front steps, dressed in fine lace. She squinted at Amira, her face hard and cold. You again? She said sharply. Didn't I warn you never to come here again? What do you want now? Amira bowed slightly and said in a calm voice, Ma, please, I am not here to cause trouble. I came to tell you the truth about your missing gold. Madame Beezy crossed her arms. And what truth is that? She asked, her tone full of disbelief. Amira took a deep breath. Ma, it was not me who took your bracelet. It was your driver, Say. He stole it and sold it at a jewelry shop. Madame Beezy's eyes narrowed. Do you have proof of this story? Mama Ruth stepped forward and handed her the envelope. Yes, Ma, she said politely. The jeweler who bought it confirmed everything. He even remembered the bracelet and described it perfectly. It had your initials on it, BD. Madame Beezy took the paper and looked at it carefully. The jeweler's signature and stamp were clearly written. Her expression slowly changed from anger to shock. Her lips trembled. This can't be true, she whispered. Say? But he worked for us for years. Yes, Ma, Amira said softly. He fooled everyone. He even laughed about it at a bar, saying no one would suspect him because everyone blamed me. Madame Beezy sat down heavily on the nearest chair. For a moment she was silent. Then she looked up at Amira and her eyes filled with tears. Oh no. I wronged you, my dear, she said in a shaky voice. I threw you out without listening. I called you a thief. I ruined your name. Amira stood quietly, her hands clasped in front of her. Her heart ached as she remembered that painful day, but she stayed calm. Ma, I understand, she said gently. You were angry and afraid. Anyone would have done the same in your place. Madame Beezy covered her face with her hands and began to cry softly. Please forgive me, Amira, she said. I should have trusted your kind heart. I see now that I made a terrible mistake. Amira knelt slightly and said, I forgive you, Ma. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted the truth to come out. Mama Ruth smiled softly from where she stood. You see, madam, she said, this young girl never stopped believing that her innocence would be revealed. She has suffered much, but her heart remains pure. Chief Duro, who had just come home, walked in during the conversation. He looked confused. What is going on here? He asked. Madame Beezy wiped her eyes and said quietly, Husband, I have done something terrible. I accused Amira of stealing my gold bracelet. But it was Say, the driver. He sold it. We have proof. Chief Duro looked at Amira, surprised. Is this true? Mama Ruth nodded. Yes, sir. The jeweler confirmed it himself. Chief Duro shook his head slowly. So all this time we punished the wrong person. He looked at Amira with regret. My dear, I am deeply sorry. You did not deserve what happened. Amira bowed her head humbly. Thank you, sir. I only wanted to clear my name. That is enough for me. For a moment, the whole room was silent. The air was heavy with guilt and relief. Madame Beezy stood and walked over to Amira, taking her hands gently. You are a better person than I ever was, she said quietly. You had every reason to hate me, yet you forgave me. I will never forget this. Amira smiled softly, her eyes shining. It's okay, Ma. Holding anger would only make my heart heavy. I am free now because the truth is free. Mama Ruth placed a hand on Amira's shoulder proudly. That's my daughter, she said. God fights for the innocent and today he fought for you. Madame Beezy turned to her husband and said, We must make things right. We cannot just say sorry. We must help her rebuild her life. But Amira shook her head gently. Ma, I don't need much. I have a place at the church. I'm happy there. I only wanted peace. Madame Beezy smiled through her tears. Still, I want to help. Please allow me to visit your church one day. I want everyone to know that you were innocent. Amira nodded slowly. That would mean a lot, Ma. As they left the mansion, Amira looked back one last time. The same house that had once broken her heart now felt lighter, as if the walls themselves had heard the truth and sighed with relief. Outside the gate, Mama Ruth held her hand. You see, my child, she said with a proud smile, truth may sleep for a while but it never dies. Amira smiled, the wind brushing her face softly. Yes, Mama. Today I feel free. They walked down the street together, the sun warm on their backs. Amira felt her heart rise with hope. The world still had good people in it. She had found pain and kindness, loss and faith, and now peace. That night, when she returned to the church, the children ran to hug her. Auntie Amira! Auntie Amira! They shouted happily. She laughed for the first time in months, her laughter bright and free. She looked up at the stars and whispered, Thank you, Lord. The truth has spoken. A few weeks passed after the truth came out. Life at the small church had become peaceful again. The children laughed every morning and Amira's smile had fully returned. She swept the courtyard, cooked for the little ones and sang softly as she worked. Her heart was lighter than it had ever been. Each day she thanked God for giving her justice. One bright Sunday morning as the church bell rang, a black car stopped outside the gate. Everyone turned to look. From the car stepped Madame Beezy, dressed in a simple but elegant blue dress. Her face looked humble, not proud like before. She carried a small bag in her hand and walked slowly toward the church door. Mama Ruth saw her first. "Ah," she said softly, surprised. "That is Madame Beezy. What brings her here?" Amira froze for a moment. Her heart began to race. Memories flashed before her, the shouting, the pain, the tears. But then she took a deep breath. She wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had already set her free. When Madame Beezy entered, the people inside grew quiet. The children stared, whispering softly to one another. Madame Beezy looked around, her eyes searching until they fell on Amira. She stepped forward and said gently, "Amira, my daughter?" Amira blinked in surprise. She had never heard the woman call her daughter before. Madame Beezy's eyes filled with tears as she spoke louder so everyone could hear. "My people," she said, "I came here today to tell you all something important. I wronged this young woman. I accused her of stealing what she never touched. I threw her out and called her names. But I was wrong. It was my driver, Sei, who stole from me, and she was innocent." There was silence in the hall. The sound of her voice trembled as she continued, "Amira never fought me. She forgave me instead. I came here today to ask for her forgiveness again, and to make things right before everyone." Mama Ruth smiled proudly. The crowd murmured softly, touched by the moment. Amira stood quietly for a moment, then walked forward and said kindly, "Ma, you don't need to cry anymore. I forgave you the day you came to me. I am happy now." Tears rolled down Madame Beezy's cheeks. "You are a good girl," she said. "I don't deserve your kindness, but I will do what I can to show my heart has changed." She reached into her bag and brought out some documents. "Amira," she said, "I spoke to my husband. We want to offer you a better job, as a manager at our charity foundation. You will help other poor girls just like you help the children here." Amira's eyes widened. "Ma, that's too much," she said softly. But Madame Beezy shook her head. "It's not enough," she replied. "You deserve it. And there is more. We found out about your younger brother, Kunal. He's a smart boy. We have paid for his school fees for the next 3 years. He will not suffer again." Amira gasped and covered her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "My brother? Oh, thank you, Ma. You don't know what this means to me." Mama Ruth stepped forward with a warm smile. "See, my child? When your heart is clean, blessings find their way to you." Amira turned to Madame Beezy and hugged her gently. The older woman hugged her back tightly, crying softly. "I will never forget your forgiveness," Madame Beezy whispered. "You have taught me what true goodness looks like." Later that afternoon, everyone gathered outside the church. The sun was golden, painting the sky with a beautiful glow. Children played and laughter filled the air. Madame Beezy spoke to the people again. "From today," she said, "our foundation will support this church and its work. No child here will go hungry again." The crowd cheered happily. Some clapped, others shouted, "Amen." The children danced around, singing songs of joy. Amira stood quietly beside Mama Ruth, watching the celebration. Her heart was full. She thought of the day she had walked these same streets with tears in her eyes, homeless, broken, and afraid. Now she stood strong, respected, and free. Life had turned around in the most beautiful way. That evening, after everyone had gone, Amira sat outside the church with Mama Ruth. The air was cool and the sound of crickets filled the night. The sky was orange and pink as the sun slowly sank beyond the trees. Amira looked at the sky and whispered softly, "Truth never hides forever." Mama Ruth smiled beside her. "Yes, my child," she said warmly. "The good heart always wins. You kept faith when everyone turned away, and now see how your patience has been rewarded." Amira smiled, her eyes glistening. "It was hard, Mama. There were days I almost gave up. But your words kept me strong. You told me God fights for the innocent, and you were right." Mama Ruth laughed gently. "Of course, my daughter. I've lived long enough to know that lies are fast, but truth runs longer. It always catches up." They both laughed softly. The children were already asleep inside, and the quiet of the night felt peaceful. After a moment, Mama Ruth asked, "So, what will you do now with your new job?" Amira thought for a while before answering. I want to help other girls who were treated unfairly, those who have no one to believe them. I know how it feels to be blamed for something you didn't do. I want to give them hope just like you gave me hope." Mama Ruth nodded proudly. "That is a good dream, my child. You will touch many hearts." Amira smiled brightly. "Maybe one day I will open a small home for poor girls where they can learn and grow. A place filled with love." Mama Ruth placed her hand on Amira's shoulder. "And I will be there helping you cook for them," she said, laughing softly. Amira laughed too, the sound gentle and free. "Yes, Mama. You will always be part of my story." The two women sat in silence for a while, watching the stars appear one by one. The cool wind brushed their faces, carrying the soft scent of evening flowers. Amira felt peace in her heart, a deep, quiet peace that only truth could bring. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "Thank you, God. You turned my pain into purpose." Inside the church, the candlelight glowed faintly through the windows, lighting the wooden cross on the wall. Amira knew her journey was not over, it was only beginning. She had been tested, broken, and healed. Her life had changed not because of wealth but because of forgiveness, truth, and love. Mama Ruth stood up slowly and said, "Come, my daughter, it's time to rest." Amira rose and followed her inside, her heart light and her soul grateful. As they entered the church, a gentle breeze passed through the open window, as if heaven itself smiled upon them. Amira looked once more at the glowing sky and whispered softly, "Truth may take time but it never hides forever." Mama Ruth nodded, smiling beside her. "And remember, Amira," she said quietly, "the good heart always wins." Amira smiled back, tears of joy in her eyes. "Yes, Mama. It always does." The end.